Howdy ho neighbors, welcome back to the channel. I'm Akaya, and today we're talking about something a little different. So this isn't the normal type of content I do on this channel, so if you're clicking this video specifically for the content in this video, don't feel like you have to subscribe or anything, because I'm most likely not going to do anything like it again. I'm going to regret that later, aren't I? So today, as you can tell from the title of the video, we're talking about Asperger's. So for those of you who don't know, Asperger syndrome is a very mild form of autism. Now I'm assuming any of you watching this probably already know what autism is and the effects of it. So I'm not really going to go into that here. I'm making this expecting that you already know. If you don't, I suggest you go read on some of that first because it'll help later on. So like many things in this world, autism is actually a spectrum. Asperger's being a part of that spectrum, just being a lot higher than what we consider to be autism. Right about here, I don't know. And while that seems like it might be something that's amazing, wow, yeah, they're barely affected at all, it actually does have some effects on how they're able to deal with it. For instance, myself, my parents didn't even think to check for a diagnosis like that until I was in my early teens, which could have saved a lot of headache earlier down the line. Even nowadays, anyone I meet, if I tell them that I have Asperger's, they either don't believe it or tell me that they never would have guessed that because I don't seem like I have it. The problem with that is because Asperger's is on the autism spectrum, a lot of people look at it and expect to see the same signs as autism, which in most cases you won't. Now, just because it's a lot harder to notice than lower parts of the spectrum doesn't mean there aren't signs to look out for. A couple things to look for in your child when it comes to Asperger's is how often they're throwing tantrums, which is not a perfect way to tell because they're kids. They're going to throw tantrums either way quite often in their lives. Also check their social interactions with kids. While it might not be as bad as people who are lower on the spectrum. Now, before I get any further, I'm not medically licensed or anything. I don't know what the term would be here. I'm just someone with Asperger's trying to help people who might be looking into Asperger's. So don't take everything I say as gospel truth or anything. My chair is creaky. So while I can't give perfect ways to look for signs of Asperger's in your kids, I can give a couple of guidelines, at least in reference to how I was as a kid. A lot of kids with Asperger's will throw a lot more tantrums than normally, and if that can be kind of hard to tell, especially if you're a first-time parent and you don't know how often a kid should be throwing tantrums. They can be quick to anger, although of course it's a spectrum, so it differs between every kid. A better sign to look for is their social interactions. Just like how with many kids with autism have extreme issues socializing, again, not all of them because it's a spectrum, many kids with Asperger's will find it hard to catch certain social cues to tell them what they should or shouldn't do in a situation. One example being, when I was a kid, I was messing around with an older kid. I thought we were just having a good time. We were all kind of messing with each other, taking our shoes from each other because they were laying on the floor or something, throwing them around. So I decided, hey, I know exactly what I'm doing. We're having fun. I'll take this a step further, and proceeded to throw his shoe right into the dumpster. I went into the dumpster next. It wasn't bullying, I swear. So yeah, I had to fish out his shoe because of that. But if I had been able to catch that social cue that, hey, it's time to stop, you're going too far, I wouldn't have been thrown in the dumpster. Another thing to look for, now that I think about it, is a lot of kids with Asperger's will kind of attach to things and get a little obsessed, addicted. I don't know if that's the right term. A lot of parents might look immediately to like video games or something, but I don't think that's a good one to look at for this kind of situation, mainly because that's something that most kids will kind of attach to. Look for something that maybe not My dogs are upstairs. Look for something that maybe not all kids get attached to. In my case, it was stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh cards. What was another thing? One thing I will say though is if you do end up finding out your kid has Asperger's, don't try to rip away those attachments from them because they do matter and that will hurt that kid. You don't want them to feel like you're taking things away from them because you just think they're too obsessed. For instance, when it came to the cards, instead of ripping them away, my mom instead made it so I had to pay for the packs on my own. So she wouldn't buy me the packs anymore. Another important thing to note is that because Asperger's is now labeled under the entirety of the autism spectrum, another important thing to note is that now that Asperger's is labeled under the entirety of the autism spectrum, a lot of doctors and stuff that can diagnose it won't necessarily diagnose Asperger's specifically. They will just diagnose with autism now, which I don't necessarily think is fair myself, but because really in the end they're not alike even if they are on the same spectrum. But my personal feelings aside, if you're wanting to find out whether it's in that Asperger's area, you may have to talk to whoever you're trying to get a diagnosis from about Asperger's specifically. Because then, even though it's on the autism spectrum, they might be able to tell you if they're in that area or not. It's not necessarily important. If you just want to go under the other diagnosis, that's completely fine as well. So one cool thing to note, even though I don't think it can be a proven fact ever, is that, at least in my experience, it seems like kids with Asperger's will kind of flock towards each other. Me and my entire friend group of like 11 kids, we all met when we were kids. And it wasn't until years later that all of us like started talking about, like, one of us was like, I have Asperger's, and then one of the others was like, no way, me too. And then that started a chain reaction, and like 90% of our group has Asperger's. So it's kind of neat to note that they flock together. I don't know. Now, if you're worried about your kid with Asperger's getting a job or being successful in the future, don't worry too much about it, especially because the main problem with most kids with the Asperger's part of that spectrum, their main issue is just the social cues. So as long as you help them get those, they'll be fine, and then jobs and stuff will be just like any other kid. They'll struggle, but they'll succeed. And hey, I know this was directed more at parents who might be looking into kids with Asperger's, but if you're out there and have Asperger's, I feel ya. It can be harder than some people think, especially because so many people look at it and just immediately throw in the autism and treat people differently because of it. But you can get through it. I did. I mean, I'm still working on my life, but I got through the teenage years, and I guess we'll see how it goes later down the line. I'm not trying to scare you, I swear. Again, if you're someone with Asperger's or maybe have a couple of questions that I might be able to answer about it, you're always free to comment below, or my Twitter is always linked in the description, so you can go on there and message me. Anyway, I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm not really aiming towards the 10-minute mark on this one anyway. I just kind of wanted to get something out there. But that's it for now. So I hope you learned at least a little, and if you're doing research, be sure to look in other places too, because I'm telling you, I definitely missed something, or a lot of things. I'm just talking about myself. So until next time, toodle-doo, neighbors.